Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Stevens. I'm the president of the Alumni Entrepreneurs Network, and we are excited to have our webinar for the month of March. I'm excited to introduce three of our great NC State alumni that I'll introduce here just in a moment. But thanks for joining us this evening. We are going to be speaking on a lot of different things, entrepreneurship, but more specifically, how to use analytics to make business decisions. So a very, very appropriate topic for if you're an up-and-coming business owner or entrepreneur, or if you've been a business owner for quite some time. Obviously it's very, very appropriate as well. So I would like to welcome Janae and George, Jeremy Freeman, and Desean Brown this evening joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'll start with you, Janae, just a quick introduction. Tell everybody a little bit about your time at NC State, what it is that you do now, and just for fun, I know we're starting, the spring is in the air. Where is the first place post-COVID that you cannot wait to go to for vacation, for maybe a fun question to get the conversation going? If you guys are joining us here on the webinar, we are taking Q&A from everyone here in just a little bit. There's a chat you can leave your comments in there below, but let us know as well, if there's a place that you can't wait to go to post-COVID. But Jane, I'll come to you. Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm delighted to be here. I did my studies undergraduate at NC State University back in the 80s. I was in textile engineering. So the College of Textiles and the College of Engineering, a Textile Foundation Merit Scholar. And I was able to work in the NC State NASA Mars Mission Research Center with Dr. Mansour Mohammed for a few years on 3D composites. And so lasting impact now, perseverance on Mars, yay. I was a small part of that, like 10+ million people working on it.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, Society of Women Engineers, a great engineering experience at State.
Well, thanks again for joining us. We're excited to have you. You've got a lot of great experience to share with everyone tonight. Jeremy, I'll come to you next. Same question. Tell us a little bit about what you studied at NC State and what it is that you're doing now. And of course, equally as important, where can you not wait to go to post-COVID?
Oh, I didn't finish that then.
That's
Sorry.
right. Come back to you.
I'm currently a patent attorney. I practice in my own business, Neo IP, and I'm a co-founder of Patent Forecast Software in Durham, North Carolina. And I can't wait to go to Croatia. We were planning to go perhaps this summer, and that would be great to have Croatia on our plans.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. It's definitely on our list as well.
That's
Jeremy, coming to you next.
Yeah, I'll be happy to go. Maybe hard to follow that. My name is Jeremy. I was at NC State, graduated in class of 2010. Grew up in the engineering entrepreneurship program as a computer science major, which basically shaped the rest of my career and life at this point. I am now actually working with someone that I met through the program, Hirsch Tapadia, on a startup called Allstacks at this point. So things seem to work out really well as far as NC State entrepreneurship initiatives go. As far as where I would love to go, I've always wanted to go to Iceland.
Very nice.
That may be where I have to go after COVID ends.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And we are excited to hear more about your experience, both as a student, getting involved in entrepreneurship, and then how you met Hirsch, and a little bit more about your journey as well. Desean Brown, thank you for joining us. Welcome and good evening. Same questions to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me, and glad to be here with everyone. So yeah, I'm Desean Brown. I am currently the founder and CEO of two companies. One, Lithios, which I started and sort of birthed out of NC State and my entrepreneurial sort of journey there. But more recently, I just started working on a sort of spin-off company. It's a company called CoWorks, and we're really excited about that. We actually now work with NC State Entrepreneurship as a customer, so that's a nice kind of interesting thing. I'm sure we can touch on that later. But yeah, I at NC State, I was a computer science major, originally mechanical engineering, but switched again in large part due to my experience with NC State entrepreneurship, and I got involved pretty early freshman year with Jennifer Kapp's class, and Park Scholar at NC State as well. But yeah, certainly some of the best 4 years, and so really enjoyed it. As far as where I can't wait to go, a few places. My girlfriend's Australian, and so she's been trying to get back home, and I usually tag along because why not? So we've been trying to get there, but they're pretty tight right now. So I'm sure that'll be the first place that we're. I'll get in trouble if we go anywhere else. So that'll be the first destination. But my own personal trip, it's actually local. I've been planning a trip to up the West Coast, flying to Portland, drive up Seattle, Vancouver, and kind of see the coastlines there. It's been a trip that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So that'll be next after Australia.
Well, you guys have some great destinations. We have had a trip planned to St. John for about a year now. We've had to postpone it twice, and so we're to get to some warmer water here real soon. So we don't have an exact date just yet, but we're working on it. So some great destinations. Hopefully we aren't too far away from being able to enjoy some of those things again. Well, thanks again for joining us. Janae, I'll circle back to you. Share with everyone, if you would, a little bit again about your experience, at NC State. What led you to NC State, and then how you sort of got started on your entrepreneurial journey, and then walk us through, a little bit more about your journey that has led you to where you are today.
Sure. So funny, it's a lot different today, but I only applied to NC State engineering. That was the only place I wanted to go. And I had a strong intention to go into new product development and R&D. Which I did actually in practice in a company, a privately held company, but international. I had minored in French. And so I was very interested in working with a company that had French subsidiaries. I traveled, great, created new products. And then a patent came along. I was an inventor on a patent, got to work with outside patent attorneys. And I thought, I'm interested in returning to school and expanding my horizons a bit, and patent law ended up being that calling. I had some great mentors at NC State. Certainly Dr. Mansour Mohammed, who was a fantastic professor in textile engineering and was the founder of the NASA Mars Mission Research Center. He was pivotal in that. In fact, the reason I only applied to State was that he came to my physics class in high school at Enloe High School in Raleigh and presented material, so that I was hooked, right? And never looked back. I was the president of Society of Women Engineers. I was in the Scholars Program, had a terrific time at State. I don't really think I thought about being an entrepreneur though. I'll confess that. I didn't really think about it till I became one. I studied just down the street from State at UNC Chapel Hill for law school. And I studied, I have a master's in theology from Duke that I did as long as I was back to school. Might as well stack up the books, right?
Yeah, we won't hold those blue schools against you, but I'm sure you had a
At least
great
I usually have someone to root for in the tournaments, right? But
that's right.
Maybe only Chapel Hill for the moment. But I will say that I launched my first law practice, right out of law school after having interned for some other firms. I thought, I'm ready to launch this and do this, to the person everyone said don't do it.
Yeah, so
you work for someone, get experience. Very different than
the traditional maybe path of going to work for a large firm and kind of cut your teeth that way. You said, I'm going all in.
I'm exceptional. I decided just to do it. And the way that I've practiced, I think, has been unusual. We're very results oriented. I brought all that engineering. I'm kind of recovered engineer now. I brought all that to bear in the methods and the process of practicing law. And I have really enjoyed it. I have more recently become more active with NC State, thanks to Dr. Tom Miller's invitation a few years ago to join the Entrepreneurship Advisory Board. And I joined the Wolfpack Investor Network as well. I've been doing angel investing for 20 years, mostly triangle related companies, but not exclusively. And am a limited partner in the Co-Founder Capital second fund. So investment's been important. And as I've gotten reconnected with NC State, I've got to say it's an impressive place, even more so today than when I was there. And I launched the first entrepreneurship scholarship, the E5X.
That's great.
Named in part after multiplying resources, but after the parable of the talents.
Yeah.
When we are given talents, I believe God gives us all the ability to create. We invest them, they multiply, we do more. And so I'm excited about investing in future entrepreneurs at NC State. And of course, I launched a few software companies along the way. And that's part of what I'm doing now.
Awesome. That's a great background. Thanks for sharing a little bit about that. And obviously there's a lot to unpack there as we continue throughout this hour. And, thanks for your continued involvement at NC State, and obviously also for continuing to, give back to the entrepreneurial community, both, through, a lot of volunteering and speaking and so forth, but also investing, literally investing in the future of a lot of the students here at NC State. So, Jeremy, coming back to you, share with everyone a little bit more, your how you got started in entrepreneurship at NC State through academically, and then how you were able to leverage the network at NC State.
Yeah, sure. It's a great story. So I came into NC State wanting to do something with computers, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. Ended up stumbling into the kind of junior level version of the engineering entrepreneurship program because the professor at the time, Stephen Walsh, came in and gave a talk in one of my classes. It was really exciting, sounded like a great opportunity to the somewhat boring alternative. Signed up and had basically the time of my life. I will say that one class was actually part of the only semester that I got a 4.0. And I kind of attribute that to me actually having so much interest and focus with the stuff we were talking about and being really excited about what I could do with this engineering stuff that I was learning, that I just kind of worked all the time. My friends hated it, but I had a lot of fun.
Right.
So I got involved somewhat heavily. Met who is now be my current co-founder, Hirsch Tapadia, through that program as a virtual employee for a company that he was starting through the entrepreneurship program.
Yeah, Hirsch is a big friend of our alumni network here, obviously, and was on the panel last month.
Yep. He's actually the reason why I'm on this panel right now. So thank you, Hirsch, if you're out there in the audience somewhere. Yeah, so met him, got really excited about what they were working on, the technology, helped them out, did some cool stuff. They actually went out, got that company acqui-hired, and we kind of went our separate ways after graduation. But I had been, bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. Mm-hmm. So I got a real job for 6 months or so, was bored to death, and randomly was just walking around the American Tobacco campus. And Hirsch was out having dinner with one of his friends. And he said, "Hey, I'm starting a company. I want to hire you." And we'd been working together ever since. And it all started because of that one chance meeting at NC State.
Yeah, that's great. We hear that a lot with the EE program of folks, having the opportunity to work closely with existing companies and, doing some work with them. And then ultimately that opens up a lot of doors, down the road, whether it's, just through the network of NC State, and as you just mentioned, meeting a co-founder that you're still working with, to this day, many years later, which is great. You have the academic experience, but equally as important is obviously, the network that you're able to develop and foster through the university and through a lot of those efforts, which is really, really interesting. So excited to unpack a little bit more about your thoughts around analytics and how you're using those to drive business decisions. Obviously, it's a key part of what you guys do in your business. So, Deshaun, coming back to you, tell us a little bit more about your experience at NC State and how that opened up the door for your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, entrepreneurship was definitely something that I wasn't hyper aware of going into school. I actually have a weird background. I was heavily involved in theater in high school. And so I was very much a student of the arts, if you will. And so I was doing different plays, directing plays also. I even did an audition at Juilliard. So I was very, in that creative space, but I also was super heavily, I was also really good at math and science. I enjoyed it and tested well. And so I was kind of at this crossroads, and I had I learned a little bit about engineering because I was really trying to figure out a way to blend both worlds. Like I wanted to do something creative, but I wanted some technical sort of challenges behind that. So engineering felt like it made sense because I really was just really trying to learn, how do I make things? Like I wanted to make things. And I didn't really know what that meant. So people were like, "Oh, you should just do engineering." And I'm like, okay. And so yeah, I got to NC State. I'm a North Carolina native, so always been a big fan of, you know, the North Carolina university systems and the big schools we have here. And, you know, certainly those were high on my list, but I was fortunate enough to get the Park Scholarship at NC State. And, you know, once that happened, there's nothing more to be said. It's an amazing opportunity. So certainly sealed the deal to take me to NC State. And to this day, super grateful. One of my proudest accomplishments. And so, yeah, but when I got to NC State, I stayed sort of involved with theater. I actually directed musicals at Centennial Campus Middle School. They don't have, or this is a while ago, I don't know what they're doing now, but at the time they didn't have a theater program, but they had a chorus teacher. So we collaborated and we did musicals, and I would direct and she would do the singing. But yeah, I knew that I was going into this engineering world, which was a little bit foreign, but I was still trying to figure out, like, how do I like make things? And I actually accidentally stumbled upon Jennifer Capp's class. And one of the best accidents ever happened. I really can't remember how I got into it. It's just been a while. I just remember, I think I just remember reading the description and being like, this sounds interesting. Learning about it's the EI 201 class for the people out in the audience, which is basically intro to entrepreneurship. And yeah, I think I just like connected with it and was like, I'm going to sign up for this, and ended up falling in love with it. Was an awesome class, really exposed me to entrepreneurship as more of a career, as opposed to just like some, you know, description of someone or something, or just like a side thing. And
it's a class that's not specific just to engineers, correct? That's
yeah,
kind of disciplinary.
That's a great point. Yeah. And that's the other thing too. This was like, I think Jen's class is very purposefully interdisciplinary. And so that was another thing for me that was kind of an eye opener, was like, you know, you could do this across industries. So yeah, we did like startup tours in that class where we would go to different startups and check them out. Jen's really good about bringing in other NC State alumni into the class to speak on what they're doing. And I ended up just kind of working on different things. And basically over time, I switched majors to computer science, in part because of that class. I ended up taking the follow-up class, which is, there was a second class that she taught that was a follow-up to that class. And I had friends that were starting companies and doing tech and software. So it kind of opened my eyes to that as well. And I kind of had that aha moment that like what I was really searching for was entrepreneurship, was this blend of using, you know, practical skill sets to solve problems and create right at the same time, which to me was just like, you know, the perfect sort of marriage. And so ended up going into computer science because that was also a great way for me to leverage those kind of math skills and not need stuff, you know, I didn't need any, you know, textiles or metals. Like I could really just take a laptop and just, you know, find a problem in the world and try to see if we could help alleviate that problem through software. So yeah, so NC State really kind of taught me what entrepreneurship was. And I actually joined the EI ambassadors, which I think are back. There was like a hiatus for a while, but we were the first crop of, we were like the guinea pigs of the EI ambassadors in the Garage 1.0, which many people may not know about. It was in a tiny little suite in Research Building 4. We felt like
nothing like the current garage, but you know, we had to start somewhere.
Absolutely nothing like the current garage, but I had a lot of really good memories in that little suite. It was like way on the edge of campus. Like none of the buses went out there. Like you had to like really know where you were going. But we got this like, you know, key card access. So we felt like cool kids because we had this like really specific kind of, you know, access. And yeah, I met a bunch of entrepreneurs through there and eventually met my future co-founders as well. So similar to, you know, Jeremy's story. You know, that's where Lithios was born, which is just a bunch of, you know, kids at the time, like looking to create and solve problems and being thrown together in this kind of, you know, workspace where everyone's trying to, you know, build things. The Filter Easy guys, if anyone's familiar with them, they were in there during that time. And I remember they would pop their heads in, Thad would pop his head in and be like, do you guys know anything about filters? We'd be like, no. And he'd be like, all right, cool. And, you know, like, it was just a bunch of random people.
Great market research. Right?
What's that?
Great market research. You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah, it just, we built our first few apps out of there, a lot of, you know, sleepless nights and weekends. And it impacted my current company too with CoWorks because it was like this prototype co-working space. It was, very, very small. So I hesitate to call it that, but that's what it was. And so it obviously left a big impact on me, because now we're building software to, help other people manage and create workspaces like that, but on a huge scale, and, similar to Garage 2.0 or, its current state. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of a bit about my NC State experience and how it sort of really drove me directly to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I love that obviously NC State has a class that really does a great job of laying the groundwork for folks who are interested in exploring entrepreneurship and can kind of realize like, wow, I could make this my professional journey. And I think it's really interesting that, you had your experience in the garage, and it's kind of a combination of both, your academic experience, and then, like you said, meeting some co-founders and then starting your first company, Lithius, which is, a software company effectively, right? Which
Yes.
very much, is a great marriage of a lot of the talents that you have. So that's a great backdrop for your experience at NC State, and, again, how that got you started in entrepreneurship. So thank you for sharing that to all three of you guys and ladies. Janae, I'll come back to you. Switching topics a little bit to the topic for this evening of using analytics to make business decisions is obviously something that you're very well versed in both your professional career and a lot of other things that you're involved in. So maybe what's just opening question, at a high level, what advice would you give to an up and coming entrepreneur on the importance of using analytics to drive business decisions?
Oh, wow, that's an interesting question. So obviously, everyone uses data to make decisions. It's just a question of how formalized is it? Our bodies are data collecting living organisms, right? We are always taking in information and comparing it to what's happened in the past and projecting where we're going to be. We don't even think about most of this, but I guess I say just start from where you are. Most of the time, the data that you need is some data that resources that you have familiarity with. Like, for example, my first software company and the one I'm running now, our patent forecast software is around patent data. I was a patent attorney of over 22 years now. What I found was that, well, the data was there initially, it was all manual. It was really hard to obtain it, but I needed access to it to inform how I advised clients. So I was kind of starting in my own zone, if you will. And I thought, well, I'll buy software. There has to be something for it, but it is a longer story than this. Started out manual. The patent office wasn't online. Can you believe that?
Right.
When I was an examiner, we had to manually sift through paper documents. It was optional to search with a computer. And that was in the mid-90s, guys. It's not that long ago. But thinking about why we use it, and the motivation for data analytics is that everything that is involved in patent decision-making, investing it in the first place, understanding competition, prior art, that's all based upon this data that is a wonderful resource. If I can just for 1 second say, we think about a patent, it's a story. Mm-hmm. Every patent is an inventive solution to a problem. So reading one patent, you could maybe do manually, but it's a different point of view when you can aggregate the data, conduct research and analytics on it, and think Google Maps, you're zooming out and zooming in. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need granularity in Street View, but sometimes you need the higher level picture. And I found that not just having data, but visualization for data to be able to communicate it to clients was really important. And that was the motivation for our beginning in the work, right? It's, I think, important to just know what data you need and why you need it. It does start with why, right? What are we trying to do? Why do we need to know that? We built our first software because there wasn't anything that was flexible enough at the time to do the research, the analysis, and the visualization that we were looking for. So kind of start with where you are. Patent data is a great thing to start with, though, because it touches every market, every business, every industry. It's around the world. It gives a lot of information. So I'm happy to dive into that more in detail if people are interested.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up. There's so many things that you can track. So how do you, I guess, with your own company, and maybe how do you advise clients on what are the key metrics or key measurables that are most important to you with regards to understanding what it is that you should be paying the most attention to in terms of tracking?
Yeah, fair question. So regarding patent data, I mean, you first need to know what you have and why do you have it? They're assets. If you don't know how you're using your own assets, you're not getting a return on the investment in it. The second thing is competitive activity. You need to know what your competition is doing. And the third is opportunity, where you're going. Most early stage companies have their exit by acquisition, not IPO. And so you can actually understand where the larger entities are, what's moving the market, kind of predictively make a trajectory for yourself and get there. So my top three are know yourself, know your competition, and know where you want to be. Those are our key drivers. And then you dig into details from there.
No, that's three sort of great foundational starting points, right? That obviously unpack so much more. Thank you for that. Jeremy, same question to you. You know, just high level, what are your thoughts on the importance of using analytics to make business decisions? And then maybe a follow-up question, you know, how do you help your customers, I guess both for your business and for your customers, how do you help them prioritize what it is that you should be tracking so closely?
Yeah, we have a very interesting view on things because, you know, Allstacks as a product helps engineering organizations make sense of all the data they have across all their engineering tools. You know, if
Can you give maybe a little quick 1 minute summary on what it is exactly that you guys do, just as a primer for everyone?
Sure, yeah, I'll be happy to. So, you know, in general, Allstacks looks at everything along your software development lifecycle and helps you predict and forecast when you're actually going to get your efforts completed. And if it's not going to be by the right time, why it's not going to be. And that involves looking at a whole bunch of data that is kind of voluminous in a lot of cases, but is actually largely unanalyzed at this point. So Allstacks pulls all that together and helps organizations make better business decisions for their engineering teams. So why, you know, how I think, you know, that relates to using analytics to make business decisions in general, not just in engineering, is I think it's really important that, you know, a lot of organizations understand why they're making the decisions that they're making. And a lot of it starts with KPIs. So at the end of the day, you look at a lot of businesses and the primary goal is, you know, to make money, to increase revenue, to grow your business. And a lot of what you decide to do, where you decide to invest, what you decide to build, you know, who you decide to hire drives towards that common goal. And as you can continue to break that down by looking at pieces of data, drivers of, say, revenue, drivers of how you're developing products, drivers of how you're growing these teams and how those impact your company's trajectory. And all of that data is analytics. It's, you know, looking at this broad slice of data at a high level, rolling these metrics and KPIs and numbers up and using those to make decisions about your business. And it's actually, I'll use the engineering example because that's where I have the most experience. It's something that a lot of engineering organizations struggle with, even today, because I think it's commonplace to have, you know, revenue metrics, sales stats, marketing stats that you report all the way up to the board. Even public companies sometimes report those out during their earnings calls, but you very rarely talk about how you're developing product. And most of these companies, that's their lifeblood. So understanding all of these drivers and how they work together is really important to building a successful company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Deshaun, same questions for you. You know, at a high level, how do you determine, you know, what it is that you guys should be tracking in your current business? And maybe you can speak to both companies that you're part of. And then how are you prioritizing what it is that you should be tracking both for yourself and your own company and for your customers?
Yeah, for sure. As a software developer background, you know, data is extremely important. And, you know, I agree with a lot of the stuff that Janae was saying as well, as far as, you know, it starts with the why and also being able to, it's one thing to collect the data, but also to visualize it. And then, you know, in Jeremy's case, make sense of it. I think that's kind of one of the big things we see is, you know, a lot of people this day and age understand that they need to be collecting data, but they have no idea what to do after that. They're like, okay, well, I don't know how to make sense of it. I don't know how to view it. I don't know how to track it. I don't even know if we really are capturing it. So For my perspective, kind of two different ones. So with Lithios, just quickly, we are more of sort of an agency consultant model. So we have a team of designers and developers, and we work with startups, but also big Fortune 500 companies to help them build out their software products. And we take them through the full life cycle, start to finish, from design to development to production. And so we are truly building their infrastructure for their in-house products. And one of our big sort of ways that we run our business is to prioritize data and data capture, because we have the daunting task of trying to ensure that our customers, that their products are going to be successful. And at the end of the day, we can't ensure that. Like, no, there's no way we can know that. But they certainly ask, like, hey, is this going to work? And really the only thing we can respond with is like, well, all you can do is measure it, because if you're not measuring your data, then there's no way that anyone knows if your product's successful. You're just going to look at your revenue and say, we're not making money and we don't have any users. Like, what happened? So we really try to help them understand, when we're building the apps, like, we're putting in these metrics capturing mechanisms. So we use a few different products. There's a bunch out there, stuff from Google. We use this thing called Mixpanel, but basically there's tools you can use in your software development that allows you to track how people are actually using your apps. And that's kind of what we do. And so everything from, some high level stats, like how many downloads have you gotten, where did they come from and stuff like that, but also internal. So like, what buttons are they clicking? What pages are they going to? We really look at that user journey. Our design team is really good at really measuring that to see, did they fall off during the onboarding journey? Maybe people got your app, they got halfway through the onboarding, but you asked 20 questions and they get frustrated and then they move on and they delete the app. Maybe you just need to get the top 3 things: name, phone number, email, the stuff you can't function without, do the rest later. So at least they get into the app. So we're able to like help them, think about those kind of things. But, again, back to the why, we always start with, well, what's the main problem that we're solving? How can we measure that, right? What's your big feature? What's your big value prop? How do we actually build things in the app to measure that? So that's kind of how we approach it from the Lithio side. And it's so important because, like I said, like, that's the only real response that we have to how do we make sure, how do I make sure my product is successful? Because at the end of the day, it really isn't up to us. We make sure the product doesn't suck from a technical standpoint, so we can guarantee you that. But the rest, we got to measure. And then on the Cowork side, similar to the other two, like, we're so quickly on Coworks, it's a product-based company. So we built this tool that we sell to different workspaces, and it's a co-working and flexible workspace management platform. So data is huge. It's one of the main sort of core impetuses of like why we did this. And so anything from like a HQ Raleigh or Raleigh Founded, for the folks familiar with them, and the Garage, we have this admin portal that we give to the people running and managing those spaces, and it really helps them streamline all of their operations, from like room booking to managing their members to billing their members, running events. And then there's a member portal where the members have apps and they can connect with each other, book rooms, and see things. So we're actually able to, because we've got both sides, we can show this full journey of, here's all the people in your space, here's how they're using it. We're able to pull some really cool reports that, again, before, not to put any particular customer, on blast here, but, we had a lot of customers who, like, they just had big spreadsheets, and they would have, weeks, literally weeks, where they would spend parsing these spreadsheets to try to pull reports. And some of these reports they like had to provide to like governments and stuff. And so we're like, how do you have the time to do this? They're like, oh, well, we got to hire someone, and they got to spend 2 weeks doing this manually. So that's kind of the power of something like what we have, is it puts everything there. So we show like dashboards and graphs. That goes back to that visualization piece, so that you can actually make sense of it as well. So we've actually, it's been really cool to sit where I sit to see the end results of this with some of our customers that have been around for a little while, where they were able to look at our, just as an example, like our usage reports of something like a conference room, and say like, well, we actually now understand our peak hours. We understand like which rooms are the most popular. Like before they just kind of eyeballed it, right? And they're able to like better market those. They're able to better utilize those across their members. And then the reverse is true. They found other rooms that were underutilized and they were able to flip those, turn them into offices. And there was no pushback, there was no riots because they had the data to prove that no one was using it anyway. And now we actually just generated them more revenue because they turned an underutilized resource to a utilized resource. So yeah, I mean, we definitely, I think data for Codex and Lithios both is at the core of how we make decisions on both product and efficacy of the product. So yeah.
I think that's a great example of using data to maybe glean a very specific actionable insight, as you just shared, right? You working with a co-working space to help them understand how to better utilize their space more efficiently, whether it's making it more readily available or maybe turning it into something that's generating revenue as opposed to sitting idle, right? That's a great example of an actionable insight from a lot of the data that you're working closely with them. If you are watching, obviously, if you have a question for our panel, please go ahead and submit that. You can put it into the Q&A. I'm going to ask a question from Tom Miller. Actually just submitted this one, which is kind of peeling the onion back a little bit deeper into what we were just discussing. But and this is just for the panel at large. What role does data and data analytics play in the products and services that you sell to your customers? Do you see it? I guess the key part is, do you see it as a differentiator for your business? And if so, how?
Yeah, I'll give a shot at that.
Absolutely.
I mean, so as a patent attorney, it's surprising, but attorneys are so reactive as a general rule. Like most attorneys wait for you to give something and then they'll do something for you. But what we've found over time, and I guess what I brought from my engineering experience in new product development, was that in order to be proactive, we needed to have more information. So you can only invent from what you know, but the more you see, the more context you have, the more data you have, the more you know. So you can actually stimulate invention from that. We use the data, and I think this is a great competitive advantage, to provide strategic advising on how and when to file patents, right? How to make a decision or take an action or not. And most of the time that's not done. Companies just file patents. It's expensive to file patents.
Absolutely.
And so having some data to drive that decision, what's the scope of this? How valuable would the asset be? How will I use it? These are questions that you couldn't ask because, as Deshaun was mentioning, the analysis of patent data was so time consuming and manual. Real time for patents was like months, not weeks or days. And so that's been a key differentiator for us. We can give an answer. Is this patentable? Is it likely to be successful? Do we have freedom to operate? What's our competition doing? How will this fit in our portfolio? What value will it give to our company? Using data to answer those questions is more meaningful to the company itself, the clients that we serve and their board, their investors, than if I only give my opinion based on work that I have done. So we use data as a competitive differentiator in the legal practice every single day. And I've been doing that for 22 years. On the software side, we took a different twist. We added machine learning and some AI to analyze our data so that instead of doing patent landscape, which is a static kind of who owns what where, it's more like weather for us. It's changing every week. And we've integrated other disparate data sources with that market information. The reason that matters is that because you have to invest in patents first before you're active with a product in the market, this patent data is always leading the market activity. And so we can have almost predictive insights about which companies will be launching first and have the biggest benefit. So investors, as you can imagine, love that kind of data. If you could know what's happening tomorrow, today, you've got a better likelihood of success with your investment. You de-risk it significantly. So yes, like competitive advantage, both on the legal services side, which doesn't really use data that much. And then obviously on the software side, we are making it live and interactive. The visualization isn't just something to look at. You can engage and drill down. So I think interactive data is important because everyone needs it, perhaps for a different reason, right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And for those, again, if you have a question, you have a patent attorney available for you right now. Obviously, that would be something that if you're paying for would be quite costly. So take advantage of it. If you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A section, and we'll get to as many of these as we can. So Jeremy, Deshaun, I'm throwing it out to both of you. Tom's question, what role does data play in your products and services? And I guess the bigger question there is, do you see it as a differentiator for your business? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, Allstacks is an analytics company. That's most of what we sell. So it's a huge differentiator for us. And so much so that people are paying us large amounts of money just to help them analyze their data. And, not only is it how we are able to build a business, we actually provide those types of competitive advantages to our customers. Everything from, knowing when products are going to ship on time so you can accurately plan what you're going to work on and build next, to understanding how you're hiring and growing, getting a sense of if your new developers are ramping fast enough is critical in improving the efficiencies and performance of your engineering team. And so much so that we regularly uncover some really interesting things from our customers who go into these reports and start looking at the data. One example that I thought is really cool is we forecast when efforts are going to be completed. We had one customer that went in and said, this team says this particular software development product is going to be done into the quarter. They keep telling me that things are good. They keep saying things are on track. And, 2 weeks before, our forecasting kept saying that, no, we don't think this is right. You may want to look into this. 2 weeks before the deadline, they said, you know what? We actually have a bunch of stuff left. We're not going to make this deadline. This is going to miss the ship date. And having that type of competitive advantage as a company can really help you because you don't disappoint your customers. You don't set up marketing campaigns and have a product release get pushed by 6 months. I don't know if a lot of you play video games, but especially these days now that they're delivered continuously, every time a delivery date gets shipped or shifted or something gets delayed, it's always really disappointing. And you give a new date and then you're going to miss it in 6 months again. And as a customer, it's just really frustrating. And that having the opinion of the market that you're really good about when you ship and when you deliver, and having that predictability is the only way you can really get that is from the data, looking at the analytics, understanding how you're actually going to perform. And that's kind of what we sell to our customers. Is that competitive advantage. And it is a huge differentiator, both for us and our customers.
I have a young son and he could not wait to get home because today was the new Fortnite update, right? So I certainly can relate to
Nice.
you from a gaming situation, how important that is. And when they get delayed, how they're just like, no. So Deshaun, same question. How do you see this as a big differentiator for your company?
Yeah, I mean, these two covered it very well, and I agree. And I think on the one hand, I'll kind of repeat something I said before, like capturing the data is one thing, but making sense of it's another. And I think what we tell investors is yeah, that's 100% our competitive advantage, because you can look at a platform and copy a feature, more or less. Like I could probably look at something and more or less produce a similar result from a feature standpoint. But when you're looking at a report or a graph, especially when we start getting into stuff like trends and predictive analytics and forecasting, which I've heard both of these people say, that's something you can't just copy by looking at it. There's some algorithms behind the scenes that really power how you're interpreting the data. There's probably data that you're capturing that might not be immediately evident to the user. And so those are 100% our, moats, as we call them, to around competitors, because, we can start to do, to give an example for Coworks, we can start to do some really cool market trend analysis. We can do, we have this really cool thing that we've sort of put out that's in the predictive analytics realm, which is, basically giving customers actionable insights on things that are likely to happen or could happen and telling them how to prevent it or something like that. So we have these automated reports that can go out to an operator and say, hey, well, we actually think this member may leave your space because they haven't checked into the space in a while, They haven't booked any rooms. They're not active in the app. And based on our data, that's fits. If it's the same profile as the rest of your members who've recently, churned and left your space. So imagine being able to stop a customer from leaving before they even leave. Like, that's some crazy stuff. And so, but by analyzing, behavior and data, you can sort of do some powerful things like that. So yeah, for sure. We have a long way to go, but I think over time, like the single reason why, specifically on the co-work side, we would outpace a competitor is really not features. It really is about the data and how we interpret it.
And a point that you're making there, Deshaun, is that sometimes it's not about the data itself. It's about the noise that you keep out. It's about what you filter. It's about what you emphasize. And that interpretation that you're mentioning is so important. So you go back to what's the real question? What are you trying to do with the data? Because there's more data. It's almost overwhelming today, right? We are bombarded with it. But how you transform that into actionable information or intelligence or something that you can use for making a decision often means leaving things out.
Definitely.
That's a great point. And Deshaun, just going back to what you just said, we use something called lead indicators and lagging indicators. And I think what you just mentioned is a great example of the lagging indicator. Maybe what is my occupancy, right? And that's obviously maybe on something tracking on a monthly basis. But those leading indicators that you can take action on are how engaged is a client or customer, and what is their engagement telling me, right? Is it telling me that maybe they're not as interested and therefore they're more likely to maybe exit, or how do I get them to be more engaged through being involved or booking rooms and those kind of things. So we track both lead indicators and lagging indicators. And in my business, our largest sales channel is our direct website at audioadvice.com. And of course, a natural metric that we were tracking is sales revenue, right? But at the end of the month, if I miss my number, well, I can't really do anything to change it at that point, right? But what we have are a lot of leading indicators in place, similar to what you just mentioned, that sort of lay the groundwork and the tea leaves, so we can see, okay, if these leading indicators we're starting to miss these, then we know the end result is going to be we're going to miss the lagging indicator, which is net revenue. So how do we make sure that we can identify those early on so that we can adapt and pivot very quickly? So that's a great point that you brought up. I'll answer. We'll go to a couple of audience questions here. We got about 15 minutes or so left, so I want to make sure we engage with as many of these as we possibly can. So someone asked, I've seen several articles recently that advise against using Google Analytics on your site. Do you have any thoughts on this? I'll open it up to the panel for anyone that may have thoughts on that.
What's the concern? I mean,
yeah, maybe if they can leave a follow-up question there. I'll just maybe give you my insight, because obviously we run an e-commerce site that's pretty large. We get about 500,000 visits or so per month, and so we use Google Analytics all the time on everything that we do. We do not use a third-party tool in addition to that, like Adobe or something like that. We just use Google Analytics at this point. One concern is that if you get to a certain size, I think it's actually a little bit over 500,000, is that they'll parse some of the data and just give you averages. So it's not precise, it's more directional. So if you had a company that was getting, in the millions of sites, maybe a Peter Millar might be a great example. You're not able to get precise direction on, that you would get if you were a smaller website through Google Analytics. But that's the only thing that comes to mind for me. I don't know if any of you guys have any additional thoughts. I know, Deshaun, you said you guys use Google Analytics for tracking for your apps as well.
Yeah, I'd love to get some more, context into that too. But the only things I've heard is that it can slow down your site a bit because it's heavy. And I think that's true. But I do think that it's a small price to pay for the insight that you're gonna get. But if you are in the business of hyper performance for whatever reason, then certainly that could be a factor. I'm wondering if maybe there's like privacy concerns, but with Google, you kind of know what you're getting. Like they're a data company, they're an analyst, you know what I mean? So I typically don't really obsess over that. I mean, it's always something we think about, data privacy, but yeah, with a company with something like Google Analytics in particular, I think your risks are probably pretty small compared to maybe some other services they may provide. So those are just the couple thoughts that came to my mind.
So they expanded to sort of what you're mentioning. They said cookies, having access to all of your data, those type of things. which, naturally you could be concerned about, but I don't know that there's an alternative, right? It is sort of a necessary evil, but hopefully the good outweighs the bad in terms of the analytics that they're able to provide, and provide you with some of those actionable insights that you can get from having a tool like Google Analytics on your website.
I would say my other advice that I give on the Lithio side, we get a lot of, early stage companies that are super obsessed with dealing with these really big problems that are frankly a decade away from them being concerned about. And I think, again, this is maybe particularly geared towards early stage companies. A lot of times you don't want to put blockers. There's enough blockers that are going to be in your way. That is just the world and life. You don't need to start adding them yourself. So whatever you need to do to get off the ground quick and get what you need quick is generally going to be the right call. Not obviously a blanket statement, but we just talked about how important data is. So it's free, Google Analytics, and it's easy, Google Analytics. So especially when you're starting out, it's just like, do it so you at least have that knowledge. And then over time, you can actually build a lot of stuff in-house. So as you're scaling and you're looking at an IPO or you're looking at an exit, maybe you do have some pretty crazy trade secrets at that point, and that's awesome. And then you probably got a staff to build those things in-house, which you can and could do if you were willing to make that expense. But early on, not worth it.
Yeah. I see another question maybe to address, talking about data walking out your door with contractors. And you're starting up early, you're fast, you're lean, you have contractors, you have no employees. Should you be afraid of IP walking out the door if you haven't patented the invention or really formulated or assessed it? Yeah, I mean, that's data you don't know about. So the first thing I always say is, there are some risks that you can manage early stage. I agree with Deshaun. One that you can't really fudge on is intellectual property, because you can go back and deal with it later, especially in today's world. U.S. patent laws, it's a race to file.
First one, right? First one. Maybe
first
a little bit more of that.
To file. So you need to know what your employees, what your contractors know, and you need to have agreements with them that say they have to disclose it to you. And you need to be in touch with them, in communication with them, have them document, make disclosures. But in a small company, that's happening like really quickly. You just need to have your eye on that and realize if something's important enough for you to be investing in it, and that's a key product that you're launching, or it's key data that's walking out the door with you, customer knowledge, et cetera, you better have some documentation of it internally. And then also, prevent disclosures. You take reasonable measures, have NDAs, have assignment agreements, so that if you decide to patent, then they need to cooperate with you. Remember, always you have to patent first. You need to file before public use. You can't wait to have revenue. You have to file first. So a couple quick points there.
And the filing process in and of itself is I use the word lightly, relatively easy, right? Obviously, if you want to fully patent something and get approval, that's a whole different process. But just to be able to file a patent.
Oh my gosh, never DIY. Like, you would never do that with your own software. You wouldn't just like, oh, we'll figure this out instead of using Google Analytics at the beginning. No. But maybe that's not the best analogy. If it's going to be an important asset, have a professional do it. Just budget for it. Interview attorneys, negotiate your early stage. We donated over 100 hours to NC State students and young alumni in each year of the last 3 years, even last year, almost 100 hours. So you can get help. There are a lot of people who are willing to support the community. There's a lot of support around. Just make sure you're really dealing with a law firm and not someone who just says, oh, I can help you with that.
Yeah.
Don't use LegalZoom or something that's just, oh, we'll file it on our own. You'll get what you pay for, which is nothing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the great parts about the network at NC State is, like yourself, who's contributed a significant amount of time to NC State. There are a lot of resources that are available for students to at least guide you in the right direction to end up working with a firm like yourself that you have, Janae. That's a great point.
Way rather have people ask than just ignore and do. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I do want to add on real quick. One of the earliest things that we spent money on was getting an attorney that specialized in startups. It has saved us so much time having someone to help us with agreements, NDAs, employment agreements early on. And, it's paid dividends. And, when you're sitting there and you have just the money that maybe you've got from your friends and family, it's a hard decision to make. But 2 years down the line, you will really thank yourself that you didn't try to cheap out or DIY something. And I think it's a great point.
Yeah, very, very wise words. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. Another quick question from the attendees here. What are your views on the ethics of data collection and analysis? So a good question to open up to the group.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something we get asked to, just on the Lithios front, building apps for people. And we've seen all kinds of different ideas come across our door. Some that we kind of are looking around, we're like, oh. I think it's a tricky subject. There's a lot of, I think, activity from legal sort of entities right now, as far as government, I should say, taking another look at some of this stuff. And so if anyone's following, Facebook and even Apple in a lot of ways, just kind of taking a look at, some of these policies that they have. But as far as in general, I do think, just like anything, you can use anything for good and for bad, but I think at its core, tracking data is not a bad thing, because like we just talked about, it helps you. It gives you knowledge. It's like, without that, you're really going blind. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, it'd be like, again, trying to drive and you can't see the road. That it's necessary. But what I do think is, I'm a big fan of disclosure. So making sure people know what you're tracking, which I think, companies like Apple do a really good job of. I come from an iOS development background, and it's actually extremely annoying because on the Android side, there's like, you can apply to track all this stuff, and then it's like one button. On iOS, like, each thing is like a pop-up that shows to the user, like, this app would like to do this, and this. And, kind of freaks people out, and it's, frustrating because you're just like, please hit yes. But I respect it though too. So I think that's probably an okay thing, as far as like, letting the user know what you're collecting, maybe giving them a chance to opt in, most certainly giving them a chance to opt out, I think is, the preferred way. But yeah, I think like anything, it can be used for good and bad. And I think there's a way to do it ethically and elegantly. And we certainly try to do that.
Yeah, I know. I like the response to Sean. There are so many companies that have privacy policies. Do they read them? Do they follow them? I mean, the Facebook example, it's a great one. I think it's maybe not so much about the ethics of, are you asking, are you letting people opt out, but it's that you're not even following you're not doing what you said you would do. So can we trust that? That's wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. On the other hand, I will say people are very freely giving away data and information all the time. And we're adults, just like we can contract for anything. We get that app, we download, click, 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 yes, I'll give that away for free because I want this convenience. I want the coupon, I want whatever I want. People give away so much data for free. And I think we don't realize how our, sort of digital twin profiles and other things that exist can be used, and so much data is bought and sold. We're sort of aware of it. It's maybe too much to cover in one simple question, but I think it's ethical. Is it okay or ethical to collect data? Sure, disclosure, privacy policy, but follow your own rules and follow whatever the laws are in your jurisdiction. Sure.
100%.
We spend, as we are given data about employees at companies, we spend a lot of time helping leaders not misuse the data they collect. So we have an interesting view on this. Traditionally in engineering, there was probably a push 20 so years ago to measure the number of lines of code that a developer wrote and try to maximize that number. And it led to a lot of very negative developments. People got really upset. People's performance were measured and their compensation was tied to something that didn't really matter to the outcomes of the business.
Yeah, that's the behavior you really want to be encouraging. Right?
Yeah, and it's important to understand how you're using and leveraging the data and decisions that you're making. You can take this, as Deshaun was saying, you can take a tool and use it for good or evil. And I think a lot of the questions that people raise about the large companies like Facebook is, are they using this for bad purposes? I don't necessarily care that they have it and that they're using it to show me relevant, links to kayaks or something like that. But when they start using it to like influence how I vote or change the fabric of society, that's when, these businesses are not being ethically responsible. And that's maybe the part that scares me the most about that. But the collection, I think, is usually above board as long as you're open and honest with your users about it.
Absolutely. Just last question. We're up against the hour. Last question. Are there any resources that you would recommend to the folks joining us tonight on, how maybe they can better understand the analytics, or how they can better think through which metrics they should be tracking that you could share with the group? Does anything come to mind?
There's a ton of great resources, especially on the engineering side. If you're building software, one great place to start is there was a book published called Accelerate, based on the DevOps philosophy. And it talks about how companies move fast and how that can actually be impactful to your business.
Great one. Janae or Deshaun, anything to add? One of the ones that comes to mind real quick, maybe while you're thinking about that, is we subscribe very closely to a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, the 4 DEs. And it's basically, come up with the most important rocks and KPIs, come up with a scorecard so that you're tracking those on a weekly basis, have a cadence of accountability, and make sure that they're known, throughout the organization. So that's something that's really helped us codify, what it is that we're tracking. So I don't know if you have anything else to share with the group.
No, I think it's really helpful to be up to date. I mean, the type of data that's available, the quality, the type of analytics, it's changing very rapidly. So I would almost not only go to books, but I would go to thought leaders in your industry to see what's trending, to see what's important. I mean, even I think I like a lot of the research that's done at other universities everywhere, Harvard Business Review, MIT, NC State obviously has thought leaders in this area. We have also like an advanced data analytics group, I think, at NC State University. So look close to home, but look at what research is happening now and be on top of that. I think there's a lot of really amazing approaches, from investing to, really every single market, every industry. So reach out to the thought leaders, see what's happening. There's more opportunity to interact with them, right? Get fresh data live, first person research. I like that.
Yeah, and just to follow on, I totally agree. And I think the other thing that we try to do to kind of blend of both suggestions is, look for different courses you can take from some people that you think are doing a good job. So, we look at companies that we feel like are leading in this area, and a lot of them offer videos, certificates or certifications. Google offers training. You can get Google Analytics certified. Amazon is really good about offering tons of different certifications for all of their services, including things around data. So I know a lot of our folks internally will sort of, not reinvent the wheel, right? Yeah, find the people that we think are doing well, and we'll kind of see what they have to say. So yeah, kind of a blend of both kind of answers there.
Don't be afraid to invent your own approaches, right? So
there you go.
Everybody has their own point of view. Pay attention to it. If you're not, nobody else will.
That's right. I love it. Well, thank you to our all-star panel this evening, Janae, Deshaun, Jeremy. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your evening. Thank you for giving back to NC State. I want to thank everyone at NC State who helped make this happen. Obviously, the folks at NC State Entrepreneurship for putting on this webinar. If you enjoyed this, please join us again next month on April the 14th. We'll be talking about entrepreneurship and social impact. If you enjoyed this, please tell a friend, please tell a coworker. We would love to see you on our event next month. And here it is. The link is now live. You can go ahead and register for April the 14th. Again, entrepreneurship and social impact. Thank you for sharing that slide. Thank you again to our panel. We had a great time. Thank you to everyone who joined and who submitted a question. I thought it was a great discussion. We obviously could go on for much, much longer. So thank you for making this a great event. We can't wait to hopefully see people in person at events, not too distant future, but obviously this is a great way to still engage with everyone here virtually in our current situation. So thanks again. We will see you again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Deshaun. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Jonathan.
Got
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.